Today we will talk about an intermittent suction machine. The intermittent suction machine's intended use is to supply a continuous or intermittent vacuum source adequate within the stated operating vacuum range to aspirate fluids in a mechanical suctioning procedure by trained healthcare professionals. The intermittent suction machine has an operating vacuum range from 0 to 200 millimeters of mercury with full vacuum. It does have 3 different vacuum modes. You do have a reg vacuum mode, which stands for regulated, and provides a continuous vacuum level, which is adjustable. You do have an off vacuum mode, which will provide no vacuum at all during this setting. And then you do have an intermittent vacuum mode, which will provide suction at an intermittent vacuum level, which also is adjustable with vacuum pressure. The intermittent time cycle is factory set at approximately 16 seconds of suctioning time and approximately 8 seconds of off time with no suction. And it will continue in that cycle time. The dimensions of your actual intermittent suction machine are 15.88 inches long by 7.38 inches wide with a height of 10.13 inches. And it does weigh approximately 21 pounds. In order to get maximum operating range, it should be at a normal operating room temperature anywhere between 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. You also do have an inline hydrophobic filter with this suction machine as well, which does help and act as a overflow stop protection filter to prevent the vacuum pump from damage in case of overflow during the time of suction. The intermittent suction machine is also equipped with a safety system that does have a thermal limit automatic reset, which means if the compressor senses that it is overheating and gets too hot, it will automatically shut itself off. At that time, you should power off the unit to make sure that the power is not activated. Let the actual intermittent suction machine cool for approximately 15 minutes. After the suction machine has cooled down and the motor has cooled, you can resume operation for your next suction cycle. Your suction canister with your intermittent suction machine does hold approximately a volume of 2,000 cc's or 2,000 millimeters. With your intermittent suction machine, which is commonly used for gastric suctioning, with a connection usually connected to your NG tube or the patient's G tube. Depending on what type of suctioning will be performed with your intermittent suction machine will depend on what type of accessory will be needed along with your suctioning machine in order to perform your suction procedure. You do have different size catheter lengths for deep suctioning. You do have a 10 French catheter, you do have a 14 French catheter, and then you also do have a 16 French catheter. The number associated with the catheter is the size of the catheter diameter tube. The smaller the number with the catheter, the smaller the diameter of the tube of the catheter. The larger the number of the catheter, the larger the diameter fitting of the actual catheter itself. You do have your yank hour with bulb tip and your suction tubing. Your yank hour with bulb tip and suction tubing is commonly used for continuous suction and oral suctioning. The tubing that is included in the Yankauer with bulb tip is a universal tubing and may be used with either of your accessories, your 10, 14, or 16 French catheters, as well as your Yankauer with bulb tip. When it comes to your intermittent suction machine, you will also need a special adapter, which is called your 5-in-1 connector. Your 5-in-1 connector will look as a double-shaped cone in order for you to connect to your tubing as well as connect to the patient's NG tube or G tube. This here is your 5-in-1 connector. As we begin to set up your intermittent suction machine for proper use, we will first go over a few features of the actual intermittent suction machine so as to know how to operate and set it up properly for proper use. When you first receive your intermittent suction machine, your suction canister may be placed in the suction holder directly mounted in front of your suction intermittent machine. What you would like to do at that time is remove your suction canister first, as so to inspect your suction canister for any cracks that may cause a leak or a possibility for there to lose vacuum pressure. This ring here associated on the top of your intermittent suction machine can be mounted to either the left side or the right side of the machine, depending on where your actual intermittent suction machine should be placed. For normal operating use, it should always be placed on a flat, hard surface, whether it be a table, nightstand, or maybe even on the floor. You can turn your holder to either the left side or to your right side in order to set up your intermittent suction machine for proper use. Your suction canister, we stated, is a 2000 cc suction canister. This is your suction lid here that you should make sure is sealed at all times. Simply press firmly on the lid to close the canister completely. Any openings at the top of your lid that will not be plugged to any hoses should be capped off. The port directly in the center of the cap would be the port that will be connected to your hydrophobic filter. We will place our suction canister within our suction canister receptacle holder. We will get our hydrophobic filter, which is directional. It also says this side to pump, which should always be the side that should be connected facing towards the pump. If the hydrophobic filter is inverted in the wrong way when it's connected to your actual intermittent suction machine, you may get a no vacuum or no response from your intermittent suction machine. So the side that says this side to pump should be placed on the outlet located on the front of your intermittent suction machine. We will place the tubing onto the outlet with the hydrophobic filter in the correct direction. And then you will connect the other side of your suction tubing with your elbow to the opposite end of your hydrophobic filter. And once that connection has been made and completely sealed, you may then place the elbow to the center port of your suction canister lid. To proceed with proper setup, we will cap off any openings that are left open that will be connected to any tubings. So the large port here will be capped, and then your spare port to the side will also be capped, which leaves you with one open port here. The larger of the open port that is left open is a port that should be connected to your Yankauer tubing and your Yankauer if a Yankauer will be used for your suction procedure. We said the tubing is universal, so it will be used on either accessory that we had previously stated. Before we proceed to connect our tubing to the suction canister lid, we will continue on with the features of your suction machine. Directly located above the outlet of the suction intermittent machine is your on and off power switch. When your suction machine is not in use, it should always be placed in the off position. It should only be placed in the on position during suction procedures. To the right of your on and off switch, you do show your vacuum gauge. Your vacuum gauge can go preset up to 200 millimeters of mercury for vacuum. You do have dual knobs here, 2 knobs directly located underneath your vacuum gauge. You do have a white knob which is located on the rear, and that is your vacuum mode selector. The white knob, when selected, will select your vacuum mode. You do have a regular vacuum mode, off, as well as INT for intermittent. With your vacuum mode selector in the off position, we stated there will be no vacuum. When it is selected in the reg position, it will be continuous vacuum pressure that will be adjustable with your vacuum adjust knob. Your vacuum adjust knob is directly located in front of your vacuum mode selector. This vacuum pressure knob would be gray in color, and to increase your vacuum pressure should be turned to the right clockwise, and to decrease your vacuum pressure should be turned to the left counterclockwise. The vacuum pressure should always be predetermined from the physician. It is a general recommended idea for safety of the patient to always start with smaller amounts of vacuum and then increase the vacuum pressure as needed so you can get the obstruction cleared. When moving over to the back of your intermittent suction machine, you do have 2 filters located on the rear side. Both of those filters should be cleaned weekly. Once a week for sure, twice a week recommended. Do not operate the suction machine when your filters are being cleaned. In order to clean your filters, you should remove your filters from the filter locations located on the back side by simply pulling them out. Same with the other filter here. Both filters can be rinsed under a mild warm water with mild soap solution. Rinse thoroughly, and then any excess moisture should be squeezed out in a dry towel. Do not place the filters back when they are wet. They must be dried prior to be placed back into the filter location. To replace the filters, simply press them into the filter location to replace after cleaning. You do as well have your power cord for your intermittent suction machine. Your intermittent suction machine is electrical, so it does need a grounded electrical outlet for proper and safe function. If you do experience a loss of power or no power to your intermittent suction machine, there may be a few reasons or causes as to why there is no power. Of course, the first initial reason to check should be your power supply or power outlet. Always inspect your power cord here to make sure that it is firmly plugged in to a grounded electrical outlet, as well as inspect your power cord for the connection located on the rear side of your intermittent suction machine. It does disconnect at the rear side as well, so sometimes you will have to check both locations to check for power. If your power cord has been firmly plugged in into the rear port and the outlet it is plugged in does have power, and you still do not have power to your intermittent suction machine, there may be a fuse that may have blown and will need to be replaced. This fuse will be located directly underneath the receptacle where the power cord plugs into the rear of the unit. If at all times you feel that the fuse is the cause of your power loss, you should contact Advocare Systems immediately in order to have a new intermittent suction machine delivered, or for a technician to come out and replace the fuse for you. Simply close the fuse lid and press back into place. Make sure your power cord is firmly plugged in. Plug the other side of your power cord into the grounded electrical outlet for proper and safe function. Located here to the right of your power cord is your hour meter reader. That will signify how many hours the intermittent suction machine has been used upon initial use when it started at 0. Now we will begin to plug our intermittent suction machine into our grounded electrical outlet in order to get power. After you plug your intermittent suction machine into your grounded electrical outlet for proper and safe function, and you proceed to check your suction canister for any lids, for any cracks, and to make sure the lid is completely sealed, your hydrophobic filter is connected to the outlet on the front of your intermittent suction machine in the proper direction, as well as connected to the port on the top of your center cap of your lid. All other open ports which will not be used are capped off as well. You may double check before placing in the on position. After double checking all of your connections for your intermittent suction machine, as far as your grounded electrical outlet connection for power, your connection for your hydrophobic filter to the front of your outlet in the proper direction to the top of your canister lid, suction canister lid are completely sealed with all open ports that will not be used also sealed and capped off. There should always be at least 4 inches of space around the intermittent suction machine at all times while in use to help with cooling of the actual intermittent suction machine. When powering on your intermittent suction machine, you can power on and actually hear the motor running. However, if your vacuum mode selector is selected in the off position, there will be no vacuum pressure present on your vacuum gauge. In order to use for continuous suction, for any continuous suction procedure, you would need to use your white vacuum mode selector and select regular for continuous suction. Once you select regular, you may start to see some pressure on your vacuum gauge. However, if any of your ports are opened, you will not get proper vacuum suction pressure. This can be demonstrated by covering the open port at the top of your canister lid, and you can see your vacuum gauge needle go up to full vacuum. If you were trying to make any pressure adjustments with your vacuum pressure control knob by turning counterclockwise or clockwise, you will not be able to see the difference of change in vacuum pressure because of the vacuum leak. So while selecting your vacuum pressure, you should cap off or kink your tubing if connected, and then during this time use your pressure gauge selector to decrease or increase your suction pressure as needed. And as in the previous video, in order to check for suctioning, you may be able to suction some water from another container through the tubing and the accessory into the canister. We have previously stated that our yank iron tubing is universal. This tubing is 72 inches long, and this piece is the yank iron with bulb tip. These two pieces do disconnect from each other so that you may use a different accessory if needed with your intermittent suction machine. Either one of these catheters will work with your universal suction tubing. Your suction tubing does have two female ends. One female end should be connected to the open port on the top of your suction canister lid. And then the other port will be connected to the accessory to have the suction procedure performed on your patient. This will be an example of your catheters to be connected here to your suction tubing as well. With your catheters, you do have a plug as to plug the port on your catheter line in order to start and stop your suction procedure as you're inserting the catheter and extracting it for deep suctioning. So this is the cap to plug the catheter fitting. For the moment, we will place our intermittent suction machine in the off position. This is your 5-in-1 connector, which is normally used during your intermittent suction procedures. The 5-in-1 connector, we said, will look like a double-shaped cone. The reason it is called a 5-in-1 connector is because it has 5 different diameter tube fittings located on each side as to adapt to 5 different size diameter tube fittings for your NG tube or your G tube. This is a male fitting, so it will fit into the female portion of the tubing, which is extending from your suction canister lid. You will push the tubing on until it seals around the proper fitting to make a tight seal. The other end of your 5-in-1 connector is the side that should connect to your patient's NG tube or G tube for your intermittent suction. Intermittent suctioning is usually used for gastric suctioning, and we said does have a intermittent time cycle of 16 seconds on with 8 seconds off. So we will power on our intermittent suction machine again to get power. It was initially left in the regular position, so when we power on, we will see our vacuum needle go up on our pressure gauge. We will change our vacuum mode selector from continuous to off, and then from off to your INT for your intermittent setting. Anytime you place your intermittent selector mode in your intermittent setting, there will always be a time delay because it will always start in the off position. After that delay in time, you will see that your intermittent suction needle on your vacuum gauge will begin to produce vacuum pressure. So right now you see it decreases vacuum pressure and will decrease for approximately 8 seconds. After 8 seconds, then it will begin to increase again to the pressure preset for approximately 16 seconds. It will continue in this fashion of time cycle with 16 seconds of suctioning and 8 seconds of rest. If you would need to check any of your tubing, your filter, your canister, filters located on the back, you should place your selector down to the off position and power unit off while making any adjustments or checking for any seals that may have loosened or may be causing leaks. Your suction machine canister is for single patient use only. It should not be used between patients. You may be able to clean your intermittent suction machine canister. However, it is not recommended to clean the tubing. You may use a mild soap and water solution to clean your canister. Rinse it thoroughly, inspect all parts, let it air dry, and then place it back together, making sure it's completely sealed with no cracks for your next use. Any waste should be disposed of as noted by your healthcare professional. Your tubing for your intermittent suction machine and any accessories used are also disposable. Upon pickup of your intermittent suction machine, we will only be picking up the intermittent suction machine and power cord with filters. Your suction canister, lid, tubing with hydrophobic filter should all be disposed of prior to pickup of your intermittent suction machine pump. If you do experience no vacuum on your intermittent suction machine and there is power, you do want to check your connection here located at the outlet. If your connection from your hydrophobic filter connected to your outlet is not connected or has been disconnected, there will be no vacuum pressure present when suctioning. So check your connection here, as well as check your connection on the top of your suction canister lid. If you did check your connection here and here, you would like to and you still do not have any suction pressure present, you do want to inspect your suction canister for any cracks or for the lid not to be completely sealed. If it is not sealed correctly, please tighten and secure the lid. If there is any cracks in the lid and your canister is faulty, please contact Advocare Systems to have your canister switched out with a new one. If there is no power present with your intermittent suction machine, we previously stated you should check your power cord at the outlet, check your power cord at the rear of the machine, as well as check your fuses located underneath the receptacle where the power cord plugs into the rear of your intermittent suction machine. If the power is present in the outlet, your fuses are okay, and all connections are firmly secured, your intermittent suction machine thermal limit may have been reached and may have been powered off in order to reset and protect your intermittent suction machine from further damage. You would want to allow 15 minutes to pass, allowing your intermittent suction machine to cool. After it has cooled, then you may go ahead and power back on. If when you power back on after 15 minutes, your intermittent suction machine functions as normal, it is okay to proceed with your suction procedure. If you experience no vacuum pressure on your actual vacuum gauge when performing some type of suction, but you do have suction pressure coming from here, your actual vacuum gauge may be faulty. So if your vacuum gauge does not display the proper vacuum pressure, but you do have vacuum pressure to suction the patient, you would want to contact Advocare Systems in order to have your machine switched out, so we may check your vacuum gauge for any defects. If during the course of use you do experience your intermittent suction machine to stop where there is no vacuum pressure at the gauge or at the tubing, your canister may have become overfilled, or it has backed up into line into your overflow stop protection filter. If there is a backup into the line of your overflow stop protection filter, or your canister has become overfilled, that will also cause your intermittent suction machine not to provide your vacuum pressure and in order to vacuum the patient properly. In order to correct, simply power off, disconnect your hydrophobic filter connection at the canister lid, and empty your canister if it is overfilled. If there is evidence of liquid backing up into line into your hydrophobic filter, you can contact Advocare Systems in order to get a new hydrophobic filter sent out and replaced for your intermittent suction machine. If it is not backed up into line and your canister has just been overfilled, simply empty your canister, clean, recap any open openings, re-secure and tighten all connections, and then continue with your suction procedure. If at any time when you do power on and you do have your vacuum machine power with vacuum present, but you're unable to adjust any vacuum pressure with your knob selector, the actual pressure gauge selector knob may be defective and your intermittent suction machine may need to be switched out. So if you're unable to adjust any vacuum pressure, please contact Advocare Systems to have your intermittent suction machine replaced. Once again, this is your intermittent suction machine for continuous or intermittent suction procedures for your patient.